Shalom Aleichem Rabotai. We're continuing in the Mishnah Yomi for the 29th day of Sivan. We are beginning the 4th chapter in Terumot. Perek Dalet, Mishnah Aleph. Hamafrish miktzat truma u'maasrot. He took some of the truma and some of the masrot. So, for example, Lamashal, he had 100 pounds, 100 seah of the produce, and he took out 1 pound of truma. Now, normally we take 2 pounds. We're actually going to see that in Mishnah Gimel in this parak. But see, it's kind of normal to take 2%. That's probably the shiur you've heard, and they explain other shiurim there. But if it's normal to take 2%, but this guy took out 1%. He took 1 bushel out of 100. He took 1 seah out of 100. Likewise for maaser, for the 10%. So, motzi mimenu truma alav. So the Mishnah paskins that he can take the other half, the second half, when he goes back to take the second half of the 2% from the same pile, the same area. Avalo l'makom acher, but not from another place. So what's going on is you might have thought that what's he actually doing? What's he accomplishing now? When he takes out 1 seah out of 100, you might have thought the rest of it, it's still tevel and unfixed until he takes the second 1%. He's up to 2% of truma. Or you might have thought that taking that 1%, he's now fixed up half of his pile of 100. So he took out 1% and he's fixed up half of it, but the other half is tevel and it's unfixed. And since half of this pile or this storeroom or whatever, the threshing floor is fixed up, then when he goes back later and takes the second 1%, so now he's up to 2% total, he's taking from part of that, what he's taking is already mitukan, it's already fixed up, and you can't separate maaser from it. So you can't separate maaser twice. So you might have thought that half of this pile, it's mixed up and you don't know what's what and who's who, you don't know what's tevel, you don't know what's mitukan, you don't know what anything is. So taking truma in 2 separate steps, 2 separate batches, same with maaser, is going to cause problems. So we see from this Mishnah, it doesn't cause problems. He could take out 1 seah now or 1 bushel now and give it to a Kohen passing by, and then tomorrow take out another barrel, another seah, and give it to a different Kohen passing by, and he's okay. Mishnah continues, Rabbi Meir, Omer, Av motziu l'makom acher, truma maaser. He could even take from a different place. Meaning, even though he's half fixed this pile, so he's separated out 1 seah, and he's fixed up 50 seah, so he could go ahead and take 1 seah out of this pile for a different pile that's in a different city or a different farm or a different batch, and it'll be okay because we'll view it, according to Rabbi Meir, as coming from the tevel portion, not from the already fixed up mitukan portion. Mishnah Bet, we'll see perhaps a similar concept. Misha hayu perotav b'megura. Someone had a bunch of produce in his storeroom. Natan seah leven levi, seah la'ani. And he gave 1 seah to a Levi. This was the maaser rishon. We're going to see that. A seah la'ani, and 1 seah to a poor person. This was a year that doesn't have maaser sheni that you take yourself to Yerushalayim to eat there, or redeem to take the money there. But it's a maaser oni year when you give the maaser sheni to the oni. So he's taken out 2 seah out of the storeroom of the grapes or the wheat or the wine, whatever it was. Mafrish on shmona sein v'ochlan. He can separate out 8 seah from this storeroom and eat those. Divrei Rabbi Meir. So that sounds like it's pretty obvious. The Bartanura brings 2 explanations of what's going on here. The first explanation is it's a poel chaver, a worker who is scrupulous in tithing and holacha and knows what's going on with truma and maaser. And the employer, that he's eating lunch with the employer, he's working in someone's field, they're working as a contractor, someone's house, whatever it is, and he's eating a suda with the employer who's not so careful. And so what he saw the employer gave a seah to a Levi who came by, or maybe there's a Levi eating at the same suda there. He gave him a seah of food, and they gave a seah to an oni, to a poor person. So the chaver sees the balabayis, the homeowner, the employer, giving out these 2 seah. According to Rabbi Meir, he can assume all of those seah were the maaser rishon to the Levi and the maaser oni to the oni. So now 8 seah is mitukan, and he could technically eat up to 8 seah of this balabayis food. Of course, that's a lot of food, so it's it might be a little presumptuous, but we can assume that he intended all of those seya gifts as fulfilling the maasers, and not merely as a tzedakah. Now the Chachamim omrim, ena mafish ela fi cheshbon. He can't separate out only according to the amount. Now the Bartanura says here in this first explanation, it means we're talking about the Suda, the Chaver is eating by the Balabais, so just the amount of the Suda. Don't have another Suda with him, because you really don't know if he's taking from Metukan, if he intended everything to be Metukan or not, but we can rely on the fact that typically he's trying to give maaser for this one Suda, but not for another Suda, not for a great amount, like 8 seya. Now the other Perush in the Bartanura is we mean that the owner is the one separating one seya to the Levi, one seya to the Ani, and he hasn't decided yet which 8 seya of Metzukan, of produce, he wants to use right now. He's got a whole bunch of grapes, a whole bunch of wine. He's given away 2 bottles of wine, and he hasn't decided which 8 bottles of wine he's going to drink at the wedding, or whatever it is. So he can assume, according to Rabbi Meir, that the maaser he gave is still intact, which will allow him to pick later which 8 bottles of Metzukan, of fixed up wine, he wants to consume. But the Chachamim say you have to know it's intact. The cheshbon of what's still intact, that's what you get to use. So if they had already consumed half of it, you could only use 4 bottles instead of 8 bottles lefi cheshbon. Shkoyach Rabosai.